safe streets, vibrant neighborhoods, successful business and commerce. These are things that make a healthy community. We are a diverse community, rural, suburban, urban, a multitude of languages and ethnicities, ages and experiences. We are a collaborative community. Public-private partnerships make us a model community that others want to follow. It is what makes us unique. It is what makes us strong. The employees of Kent County reflect our diversity and seek to serve our communities.
People in this county, in this area, we wrap our arms around each other. We come together to collaborate, to solve problems. We're all working for the good of the whole. And I think that's wonderful. And you can see it. You can see it as you drive around Kent County.
Our impact starts the day a baby is born and a birth certificate is issued, to protecting children from deadly diseases through vaccination, to the public safety and justice provided by law enforcement and the courts, to offering veterans services and caring for the elderly. Every day we work to keep our communities robust.
I think if you are somebody who is interested in serving your community, in building a strong knowledge base and a good group of people to work with, then the county is one of your best employment opportunities out there. It's been completely rewarding in every way I could possibly explain for 26 years, and I feel like I grow every single day still today.
Leading these dedicated employees, our 19-member Board of Commissioners and our County Administrator Controller, along with our elected officials and appointed department directors, placing emphasis on civic involvement, quality housing, vibrant neighborhoods, and strong, solid infrastructure to allow businesses to thrive. Professional, dedicated, collaborative, and innovative.
Behind the scenes, collaboration between foundations, charitable organizations, nonprofits, for-profit businesses, public sector demonstrated through the county, the city of Grand Rapids, the townships, all the cities and the villages in our area. If we don't come together, then we will not have the strength that we have today, and I only hope to build upon that.
Our aim is to make our communities the best they can be. We are involved in exciting development projects, sustainable recycling programs, and creative progressive prevention programming. We partner with elected officials, impacting policy ideas that become great achievements. We seek opportunities to reach out into the community and offer our services to help our residents make Kent County thrive.
Our relationship is solid, both from a staff standpoint at the county level, as well as the Board of Commissioners. And they understand what we do and the benefits that we can do for the community, and vice versa. We couldn't do what we do without the help of Kent County.
While most of us are busy running our lives, Kent County's elected officials, administrator controller, and over 1,600 employees are serving the communities where we live our lives, so we can all have a place we are proud to call home. Kent County, its life well run.
It is 8:30, and I call to order the meeting of the Legislative and Human Resources Committee. We will start this morning with public comment. If anyone wishes to address the committee, you may do so. Please stand at the podium, identify yourself, and you have up to 3 minutes. If not, we'll move to item number 2, which is approval of the minutes. I'll accept a motion with respect to the July 23, 2019 meeting.
I'll move it.
Move to approve.
Support.
Supported. Any conversation, questions? If not, all those in favor indicate aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is approved. Next item of business is our Information Technology Performance Measurements Report from Tim Beck. Good morning.
Morning, Commissioners. Appreciate the opportunity this morning to give you guys a quick update on what's going on in the bunker across the street. I think that's a term that was coined by Commissioner Bolkowski, so I have to make sure we pass that along. But yeah, so I think, from a presentation overview perspective, I think it's pretty similar to what you've seen before. We'll talk quickly about how we align with the new board priorities, talk about some of the things we're proud of in terms of key performance metrics and accomplishments, collaborations. Interesting budget consideration that I just want to bring to attention this morning. We'll talk about challenges, opportunities, and then finally a look ahead to later 2019 and 2020. So, That's what we have in front of us this morning. Really, from a priority alignment perspective, so the work that was recently completed for the strategic plan that the county has put in, certainly I was a part of that. And when we sit down and look at where IT aligns with those priorities, our mission statement is there, but really we're a service organization first, and we've always said that, and we'll continue to be that. So from a alignment perspective, you know, we're right there in the middle. It's pretty easy to slide us into the service delivery board priority. I think we touched on some of the other ones as far as inclusive participation and effective communication. I think one of the challenges we have from an IT perspective is going to be how do we get ourselves further in alignment with those priorities, so and stretch ourselves a little bit. But this is the easy one for now, excellence in service delivery, and where I think we're extremely effective. I will touch on the key goals and metrics. We've got a few slides to get through, and I don't want to take all of our time this morning talking about numbers, and I try not to do math in front of people. So we'll touch on these a little bit, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have, but I want to spend most of the time this morning talking about some of the collaborative and accomplishments that we've had. But real quickly, from a key goal perspective, infrastructure is key to us. This is the track that the train runs on. And so within that space, we pride ourselves on maintaining an effective environment as far as availability of services go. So one of the objectives there is maintaining average server availability. So in the background there is actually a picture inside one of our data centers, so top secret. But currently we are tracking at 99.95%, 3 nines. If you're an operational person, we measure downtime in minutes, not hours. And that's something we're extremely proud of. So the second key goal is our service desk. So the service desk is really the front line of defense for folks that are calling, needing help with a piece of hardware, piece of software, questions, new requests. And so we strive to meet our SLAs with our end users at 90% of the time. And currently we're tracking around 87. I'm sorry, we tracked 87 for 2018. We're tracking toward 90 for 2019. The interesting metric there is we handle about 15,000 tickets per year in the IT department, so a significant number. So while the SLA is low, relative to the number of tickets we're getting, we're pleased, but there's work to be done, shall we say. Key goal number 3 is application services. Application services is a group of folks that are supporting OnBase, our CourtView, some of our justice applications, our GIS department, our GIS team. So they're the ones that are supporting those types of applications. And usually this metric is based on the IT survey that we produce annually. I'll talk a little bit later on. We didn't do an IT survey in 2018. We did a different type of engagement as far as measuring effectiveness. So we extrapolated those numbers by hand, and we're still tracking about 82%, which is consistent with prior years, and looking forward to better performance toward the end of this year. So, and lastly is Access Kent, our public-facing website. So we work closely with Access Kent in terms of providing services to our constituents, and the objective there is to increase. We want to see increased website traffic, frankly, by 5% annually. And historically, we've always seen that. Again, between 2017 and 2018, significant uptick, almost 1 million unique visitors to Access Kent. I think that has a lot to do with the site. The layout is good, and we're looking at doing some things a little bit differently going forward. But the interesting factoid there is that if you look at the bottom of that slide, from 27 to present, we are seeing the majority of our traffic now coming to Access Kent from mobile devices. So smartphones, tablets, highly mobile individuals. Good. All right. Talking a little bit about significant accomplishments then. We've got a picture of Sophian. Sophian's one of our network engineers. One of the things we've been working on is the replacement of our enterprise storage. And enterprise storage is where everything lives in the data center. If you've got to store data, it's living in our storage environment. And so one of the things we started in 2018 was an exhaustive search for storage vendors that were cheaper, that could increase capacity. It was a big engagement, and the picture you see there real quick is Sophian standing in front of 2 racks of storage equipment. And that's where we were. That's where we are transitioning from. The new picture of Sophion is, with the red square there, is the new equipment. So this is our new storage platform, significantly smaller, and if you read the associated text there, maintains all our requirements for resiliency and uptime, right? So we can protect that 99.95%. Gives us more storage, it's easier to manage, and significantly reduces our overall cost. So that was an exhaustive process, and one we are glad to see done, but very successful. Security team. So our security team, Kent County continues to be one of the few counties actually in the state that has a dedicated IT security team. So we have 2 individuals dedicated to focusing on IT security on a daily basis. The graphic you see there is a survey we participated in back in 2017 for a city-county kind of initiative group that measures various things related to IT. The interesting statistic there is 44% of local governments are subject to cyber attacks once a day. So not once a month, not once a year, we're talking about once a day. And we've seen that as well, certainly. And when you look at some of the scary statistics there that people have to deal with, scanning and testing internally, audit practices, cybersecurity insurance, we give ourselves 5 stars. And the reason or 7 stars, I guess. And the reason we do that is because, like I said, we've got 2 folks dedicated to this. So we can say that the things that most organizations struggle with, we do very well. There's work to be done. There's always improvements to be made. The last statement I have there, increased vigilance and awareness campaigns, really, they are continually increasing confidence. I think last year we talked about email spear phishing. We've seen a reduction in the number of that due to technical efforts. We've also seen a reduction due to the awareness campaigns. End users are simply clicking on things less because they have that vigilance to help us say, is that something good or bad, potentially not good. So, all right, a couple more real quick. The probate court on-base project. So on-base continues to be our document management system and really kind of the bell cow of IT from a going paperless automated process initiative. We took the opportunity, working with our court staff at 17th Circuit and probate court, to integrate on-base with CourtView, their case management system. So from a one-stop shopping perspective, the probate court documents are now scanned into on-base. They are no longer physical paper. And then we produce that as a link within CourtView. So it's immediately available to them to click on rather than going to a separate application. A couple of side benefits to this. It has allowed basically the elimination of processing some of those paper documents to microfilm, something traditionally done by central services. And we have done that for approximately 13,000 documents now so far in 2019. So two other really user impacting areas. It's immediate access to this information once it's scanned into OnBase. We don't have to wait for it to be scanned to microfilm and then be made back available to users. It's available to them within 1 day, sometimes same day. And then lastly, increased efficiency. Probate has offices scattered across 3 floors of the courthouse. Think of a paper manila file working its way through any one of those offices. Now the fact that they can view it in OnBase or view the documents within CourtView, they no longer have to go on that Easter egg hunt saying, playing who has the file today type of scenario. So it's been a great win for us. It is also important to note here that this has sort of formed a skeleton of other workflow we want to implement through the courthouse. And so we're going to reuse some of this work as we move through 17th Circuit and some of the other ones. So, and then the financial team here, they support the integration of Kronos. So Kronos is the time entry application used by the Sheriff's Department, and we've automated that import from Kronos into A360 for purposes of processing payroll. So that requires a whole lot less, if any now, manual intervention to actually do that. So quite a few significant accomplishments. If we move on to key collaborations, I guess no IT presentation would be complete without the obligatory confusing diagram. So we wanted to remain true to that. So we've got a lot of lightning bolts and different colors there. The purpose of the slide really is to demonstrate that we were talking about infrastructure earlier being the track. And really what this demonstrates is that Kent County in the middle there really is the hub for a lot of things that happen within Kent County as far as connectivity goes. If you look at some of the clouds there, they're not only county buildings, they're other municipalities, and primarily facilitating public safety connectivity. However, we are taking initiative now to say, if you pick, let's say, Kentwood, for example, wants to talk to Granville, from an IT perspective, they come through the county to do that. So it's not just public safety, it's other things they do as well. So it has been a huge win for us to reduce overall cost to various municipalities and facilitate better communications. So this is something we're proud of, something we continue to look forward to. A couple of other ones, talking about public safety a little bit, we have been approached by the Sheriff's Department earlier this year about better supporting the Walker Police Department and their in-car mobiles used by their officers. And so we have worked with the Sheriff's Department, with Sheriff's Dispatch and Walker to begin supporting their in-car devices. So in effect, the inside of a Walker police car, the mobile device that you see there, the Dell rugged laptop, is essentially behaves no differently than a Kent County Sheriff's Department. So we support it from the hardware perspective. Dispatch supports their piece of it, and it's been a win for us. It has reduced workload on Walker. We are able to provide a very consistent model of support from a public safety perspective. And lastly, Walker has been able to meet some of their regulatory requirements that they were struggling with just simply being a smaller organization. So, and then the GIS team has expanded its role, providing illustrative and mapping support to support data analytics initiatives. Certainly you have seen the infrastructure analysis work that's been done, some of the mapping support that's been along with that. So the GIS team has really started to reach out into some other areas simply than they've been doing before. So we're pleased with that as well. The budget consideration. So this is an interesting slide. If you look at the left slide, Kent County traditionally, from an IT perspective, has been capital intensive. So there'd be a heavy upfront capital investment in hardware and software to implement a solution. And then over time, we would just replace it 3, 5, 7 years down the road with another heavy capital investment. What we've seen over the past few years is really a migration toward the right side of that slide, which is we are no longer the cloud, we are part of the cloud. So many of our systems now are outsourced or follow the software as a subscription model, where you're subscribing to it much like a cable bill on a monthly basis. Some of the same frustrations, actually. But if you look at the Office 365, A360, all of those no longer reside on premise. They may interact with something on premise like OnBase, but the core system is located in the cloud. And so that has really moved our financial model from one of capital intensive to one of more the monthly or annual subscription based. So that has been a challenge for us to start to think about financially. And we've always enjoyed great support from Fiscal, but this is just something that's in front of us here as we move forward. So talking about moving forward, some of the challenges and opportunities we've got in front of us, like I just mentioned, the move to cloud-based services. This is starting to challenge IT staff a little bit. If the servers are not on premise anymore, I have a lot less need to have a technical person on presence, or that person needs to have more of a changing skill set in terms of business. So no longer are they replacing memory in a server, but perhaps they're managing vendor relationships. They're worried about data integration, data standards, data scrubbing. They're involved in the legal side, working and reviewing contractual documents. So it really changes the face of IT a little bit in terms of what our requirements are. And that has been a challenge for us, but also an opportunity as we've seen people grow, in some cases very significantly. Technology debt talks about what is the physical cost of old stuff. And so when we look around the county, we have a number of applications that, I won't say ancient, but I will say they're aging well. And what does it cost us to support those? And there is a physical cost of maintaining hardware and things like that, but there is a logical cost of saying it's no longer secure, it's no longer patched. Where do I position it in the environment that nothing else can talk to it? And so from an organizational support perspective and a physical cost perspective, we spend a lot of time dealing with old stuff. It's better than it was, but there's a few that still need work. Succession planning. We have a number of our key IT individuals that are increasingly retirement eligible. And so how do we get what's in their head onto paper or into the head of another person, I think is key for us to be successful in the next 3 to 5 years. Pension and recruitment, I think it's probably no secret. The job market for IT continues to be competitive here in West Michigan. How do we get the right people to want to work for this organization? Last two really talk about pace. The pace of technology continues to outpace what we believe in some cases our organizational need is, and what is our appetite for adopting new technology, I guess is the way to say it. So, and then lastly, the increasing demands on IT. People want more, better, and faster system integration. A key example would be Carpel. Carpel is the new software being implemented at the prosecutors for their case management, and that has a significant IT component as far as interacting with various systems. And so, seeing more and more of that. If you think back a couple of slides to the cloud, we're part of the cloud, we are not the cloud anymore. So lastly, as we look ahead then toward 2019, 2020, the infrastructure analysis, we're guilty by association with that one. We know that whatever happens to the bunker is going to affect IT, certainly. We have a data center that resides in 320, and we reside there, so what does that mean for us? Decentralizing to different departments, changing the way we work, and still maintaining existing service levels is something we're talking a lot about. And then regardless of what happens with IT, how does it affect the rest of the county? The North County property is really interesting from an IT perspective, simply because nobody disagrees with the premise of it. We break out in a cold sweat because we got to connect it to something. And there's not much of a footprint for county infrastructure, frankly, in northern Kent County. So what does that look like for us? So that's a big challenge for us. And we've been working with the Sheriff's Department and facilities management to make sure all of that is understood, but just a different perspective on some of these types of things. The external IT assessment, I haven't talked a lot about. IT is currently undergoing an external assessment by a third party. And the idea of that is taking a look at our organization from an outside third-party point of view to basically say, are you effective at what you do and how you do it? Are you organized correctly, and do you measure yourselves the right way? So we expect to have some of those findings and recommendations back as we close out 2019. But I think it's going to challenge us a little bit and say, what is our appetite for changing some of the things we've historically done the same way, for the last 10, 12 years. Anticipate a new phone system coming in 2020. We think we're far enough along in the budget process, and there seems to be good support for that. So we're starting some in-depth discussions on what that means. And the phone system is one of those things that touches almost everybody in the county from an employee standpoint. So there will be a significant cultural change, I think, when we look at taking phones off of desks, better use of mobile phones, those types of things. This will be a big cultural change for us. 360, which is our financial management system, that is undergoing a couple of different aspect changes here over the next few months. We've got an Azure migration, which is largely transparent to end users, but represents significant testing for fiscal and IT. And then later on down the road, timing is still to be determined, a version 4 upgrade, which is a significant change at first glance in the end user experience. So we've got to get ready for that. We're never going to stop with IT security. We talked a little bit about that. And then lastly, we've developed a new MPP performance application in-house that we are rolling out in November to better evaluate MPP staff for the annual review process. So I think that's it. Before I turn it over for questions, I would be remiss not to acknowledge IT staff, IT leadership. They're the ones that do the work. I'm just overhead. And they do the work. We've got a great staff. We like to say that we don't take ourselves too seriously, but we take what we do very seriously. And I think we've seen that here today, and it's a great group to work with. So with that, happy to answer any questions.
All right, good. Thank you, Tim. Commissioners, any questions? Yes, Commissioner Coleman.
Thank you, Chair. First, I'd like to just, for my colleagues that are maybe less interested in some of the IT details, I'd just like to point out that the uptime, the service, everything, the IT organization, from my perspective, is run very well here in Kent County. And my specific question is just around disaster recovery, what that looks like, planning, testing on an annual basis, and specifically with a scenario at like we're without power for 2 weeks, can we still record mortgages at the clerk's office, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's a good question, thanks. So from a DR perspective, we do a couple of things that are I'll comment on. One is we currently operate 2 data centers that are geographically separated by, so a natural disaster type of event wouldn't affect both data centers. Within those data centers, they run hot, meaning they are both available 100% of the time. So from a DR perspective, we can fail over to data centers anytime we want, and frequently do, frankly, as part of the downtime metric I was showing you earlier. So heavily virtualized environments, we spend a lot of time, a lot of money making sure we're highly available, not just for the day-to-day stuff, but the DR as well. So we also do the 3-2-1 methodologies and some of the other things that you may be familiar with as far as protecting, backups off the tape, off-site, those types of things as well. So as far as testing those go, we do have an enterprise DR plan that we work through. We review it on an annual basis. We don't necessarily test on an annual basis, and that's one thing we do need to be better of. I will say that we have lived in the graces of hot data centers, that ability to fail over real time. And I don't want to use the word complacent, but we've gotten a tad, we're sitting on the couch maybe a little bit too much when it comes to DR. We do have a plan that we review annually, so does that answer your question? It does, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Skaggs?
Thank you, Chair. Tim, could you just go a little bit more over where you're thinking about this, the new phone system in 2020?
Yeah, certainly. So one of the things that we looked at with the new phone system is not just dial tone, which is, when I pick up the phone, I get dial tone, but how are people actually using them? And so one of the interesting things about a new phone system is when we look at the market in general, there are not a lot of phones on desks anymore as phone systems are being replaced. When we look around the county, we've got about 1,800 physical phones on desks, and we have about 600 mobile phones that the county support or pays for. And so the question becomes, when our service desk gets calls, and somebody says, it's my first day here, how do I forward my desk phone to my mobile phone? Because I'm never going to use my desk phone anymore. It starts us thinking that we need to change our strategy as it relates to phones. So I think what we're going to see with a new phone system, rather than the one-size-fits-all model that we currently have, that you get a phone on your desk and it behaves this way, we're going to move to something a little bit more either department level or even individualistic about how they want that phone to work. Do they want to use a mobile phone? Do they want a physical phone on their desk? Do they want to use a headset and have the phone on their computer? Those types of initiatives, I think, is where we're going to see it. So one size doesn't fit all anymore. And frankly, when we looked at the cost of the new phone system, about half the cost is physical phones. So if we can reduce the number of physical phones, and I think there's an appetite for that around the county, we've seen that in some areas already, then I think we can significantly reduce the cost, but provide a more flexible platform that people want to work in.
And just to follow up, one of the things that I've thought about is what are the ways in which we can have like a central texting system if we needed to text every employee, or if we had an emergency and needed to text, staff at the sheriff's department, or either within the administration or within the elected organizations, just ways to get it all out quickly.
Sure.
As opposed to phone trees of the old system, I suppose.
Exactly. And it's a good observation. I think there's 2 answers to that question. One is that we've seen through talking with various departments like FOC that a lot of their clientele don't want the phone call anymore, right? They want to receive a text message or the health department about an appointment reminder or something else, right? They don't want a phone call, they want a text. So that's one element of it. The other one is just a general countywide communication. The phone system can address part of that. But I will say, I know that there's conversation coming out of the administrator's office with Lori about what does SMS-based or text-based communication look like on a countywide level. I think that part of the discussion, you have to include the phone system in the discussion, but I'm not sure it's the core responsibility of the phone system to provide it. Does that make sense? The two have to be tied together, no doubt. But I wouldn't necessarily look at the core requirement of a phone system to be the ability to enterprise everybody in the county, because we simply don't know what a lot of the phone numbers are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I urge you to take advantage of that because, millennials, Gen Z, they don't check their voicemail.
Exactly.
And speaking as someone from Gen X, not all of us do either. But we all still at this moment are checking all of our texts. So I think we got to think about the most efficient and effective ways to work together and to contact each other as we move forward. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Talon?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tim, for your work and the department's work. Wanted to follow up on the bullet that says increasing demands on IT for more, better, and faster system integration, and specifically ask about the future potential for connecting data between the Sheriff's Department, the courts, the prosecutor. You mentioned the new prosecutor software, which I thought I heard you say has some ability to do that better, but where are we at that in that potential for connecting all three of those to see what kind of outcomes we're having for individuals that are in that system?
Sure. I think there's a couple answers to that. One is that we have the new data analytics group that has really come together in the last few months, and I think that really speaks to exactly what your question is how are we better leveraging all these silos of data across the county? I think there is a better general awareness, more so now than ever, that these silos exist, and the level of cooperation certainly is increasing with the ability to make that data available to other people within the organization. There's also this sensitivity to the privacy of that data and how should we use it and should we use it. So there's a lot of discussions around that. But I think, the more, better, faster type of comment is the increased pace is, you got to be careful you don't, get too far out ahead of yourselves, over your skis, so to speak, because I think that's the danger of releasing information that either isn't scrubbed or isn't appropriate type of thing. So it's a complicated question, but I think my observations are through the work the administrator's office has done and the general acknowledgement of a lot of the other departments that we hold data you may find of interest, and you're starting to see that now through the urban-rural reports. You're starting to see it through the infrastructure analysis. There's a lot of those initiatives that are in process that are improving our ability to deliver effective data for decisions. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
So, Tim, you had indicated earlier that some of your team members are with you this morning. Could you introduce them to us?
Yep, certainly. Certainly. We've got Janice Rockburn. Janice is one of our IT managers for managing our GIS and our financial area for A360. We've got Bill Elliott. Bill is responsible for server storage and backups for that team. We've got Steve Watson, who is responsible for specialty apps, so that is our justice and on-base area. And then we have Cynthia Robinson, who is our IT manager for our service desk area.
Good. Well, welcome all. Thank you for all your work. I do have just a follow-up question. I saw a news clip this weekend on the prevalence of ransomware in the public sector, and particularly a nightmare that happened with the city of Atlanta. Have we ever been hit with a ransomware attack?
We have
a
not.
Successful ransomware attack.
Yeah, we're hit almost daily, I guess, is probably the answer to that question, but not specifically a ransomware attack. We have been hit with bad DAT files from our antivirus perspective that shut down workstations that we thought looked like ransomware, and that's several years now. We're several years removed from that. We have not been actually had an effective ransomware campaign within the county. We've got quite a bit of vigilance now. We do get a lot of calls for people saying, hey, should I click on that? Should I click on that? But luckily, knock on Formica, we have not been, but we spent a lot of time working on it. But to answer your question directly, no, we have not.
Well, one of the points was that if you haven't been successfully hit by ransomware, it's not luck. It's because you're working very aggressively and consistently to protect yourselves and us.
We do work hard at it, and the adage is we have to be right 100% of the time, and they only have to get lucky once.
Right.
Yes, but I appreciate the comment, thank you.
And then if you'll bear with me, if I can go back to my colleagues with information on when you project the 17th Circuit system to be converted over?
I can't project a time on that. One of the things, and the reason is that they're busy, we're busy. Some of it's a timing issue, but some of it is just the realization that when we design systems like we did for probate, we want to make sure they're flexible enough that we can extend that work to other departments. And then, so we want to get into 17th Circuit. We want to identify specific business processes that we can use to improve. And that takes time. But so we have a lot of conversations with them over there, but I don't have any timing to share with you directly at this point.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation this morning.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to item number 4, which is a request to incorporate additional positions. Wayman?
Yes, this is a request to the board to add an indigent defense administrator, attorney in administration, and a clerk 1 at the front of the court, director of population health consortium at the health department, and to convert a part-time animal shelter technician to full-time status at the health department, and to add an emergency management coordinator for the sheriff. Administration is requesting a full-time indigent defense administrator attorney to comply with the current Michigan Indigent Defense Commission Act. The estimated cost of this position is $156,100. The front of the court is requesting an account clerk 1 to keep pace with the demand for child support audits. The estimated cost for the position is $62,014. The health department is requesting a full-time director of population health consortium. The estimated cost for the position is $126,800. The health department is also requesting to convert a part-time animal shelter technician to full-time status. The estimated cost for the position for conversion is $29,100. The sheriff is requesting a full-time emergency management coordinator position. This estimated cost for the position is $141,500. If funding is eliminated or decreased, the positions will be eliminated unless continuation funding is approved pursuant to the fiscal policy on grants, contracts, and donation. I would also like to ask you to look at the cost funding recommendation, which totals $515,800. Funding will be included in the 2019-20 recommended budget. And in addition to that, I draw your attention to the documents that are behind, which explains the various positions that are being added, memos that were reviewed by our operating budget review team, a small team, the Human Resources Director, Budget Director, Fiscal Services Director, myself, and Matthew Van Zetten. We comprised that team, met with all the departments that were requesting these positions and made sure that these positions, in fact, indeed, were something that we might recommend. I can tell you that that process is very strenuous. We do go through a lot of analysis before we conclude to add these positions. In fact, in one case, we did bring in an outside evaluator, Plant Moran, to take a look at one of the departments. I can tell you that the process is very strenuous and deliberate to determine whether or not these positions should be added based on where we've been. Back in 2009, when the recession hit, we reduced a number of employees. 111 employees were reduced out of the county's budget. And I also put on your desk, there was one call that we received from a commissioner late yesterday afternoon or early afternoon, and I decided to bring that document to your attention as well. I provided them a response which goes through a lot of detail related to the Sheriff's Department, and also I would draw your attention to the back page, the last couple of paragraphs where we talk about lead, the important issue that Commissioner Talon and others have raised related to our commitment to lead. We are also going to have Adam Lunda present in September to you related to the lead efforts. There's a document attached that also reviews the summary of resources that we have applied to our lead issue, very important, critical issue that we recognize as well. A lot of detail here. The department heads are here to answer questions related to this. The plan would be to have this request as well as the next one provided to the board in September. My hope is that we provided you enough detail, and of course, This process is the first step of the process. The board has to, the Legislative Review Committee has to recommend these to the Finance Committee, and that's what I'm putting in front of you today.
So that we can continue with this deliberation, is there a motion? It's been moved and supported. Any comments or questions? Is that a pen up or is that a hand up? Yes, Commissioner
Yes,
Monk.
thanks, Chair. Wayman, when we downsize, right-size those 111 positions, I was going to ask you that same question. How many positions have we picked up since then, and where are we at?
We've actually, the total that we've got, let me see if I can find that here. We're still, there have been a total of about 100 employees total from that time, about 90 to 100 employees that we've actually added, picked up since that time. And these are part-time as well as full-time, so I'll have to get that exact number for you. But back when we made the reductions, you also remember that the airport, we phased the airport into the authority, so we lost some of those employees. We also lost the zoo, not lost, but we moved them to their own entity. That was a total of about 160 employees. So all total, we're looking at back in 2008, when we made the reduction, till now, there's been a 262 employee reduction in the total number of employees, including the airport and and the zoo and all of the other departments. So in total, we're looking at approximately 150, 160 employees that we lost between the zoo and the airport. So in total, we're looking at probably 100 plus employees that we've actually brought back to the books as of the last several years.
So
We're still not back to the levels that we were at.
when we're comparing apples with apples, we're not at that level yet?
Right.
Because with this being such a growing community and we have the same needs at the DPW, which we'll be talking about in a minute,
Right.
I would expect this to be an ongoing thing in the near future as we build out in the county and the needs are there, so.
Yeah, and even with that, we are very careful to not overhedge, because we expect there to be a recession at some point down the road. We're not sure when that will happen, but we don't want to go through what we've gone through. So we're looking for efficiencies everywhere we can get them, how we can leverage shared resources versus adding positions without thinking about the overall impact. I can tell you that we spend a lot of time with the Sheriff's Department in particular over the last several months, talking through how do we balance the number of people that we're adding, knowing that the overall budget is impacted by them. They're 35% of the total budget. They've maintained that throughout the past 4 years. They've not grown exponentially. So we're very guarded about how many positions we're actually adding. Even though the economy is ticked up, even though growth is happening, we're attempting to maintain a level of balance so that we don't end up in a position where we have to reduce, cut down the road. And I can't see enough about the departments and their willingness to work together. For instance, the clerk working with our IT department or our equalization department and assigning a person from her office to support the equalization effort, IT working with equalization. There's just been and the sheriff working with fiscal services to figure out how we could manage some of the analytic work in the sheriff's office by utilizing people in our fiscal services department. These are the types of things we're doing instead of working in silo to mitigate the need future to reduce the 111, 150 employees out of the organization. So,
Thank you for that, Wayman, appreciate it.
Commissioner Tallenford.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of, first up, I guess kind of a comment related to the director position for the Kent County Population Health Consortium, which I recognize as an important position. What I guess surprises me a little bit about it and seems somewhat uncharacteristic of Kent County is that we're going ahead and funding it ourselves and hoping that the other partners in that consortium will step up to the plate later on. That's not the way I've seen us work in the past, so I'm wondering if you could perhaps comment on that and what's up with that?
and it is a bit of a hedge. We do recognize that long-term, to keep this position in place, we need to fund it appropriately. We currently do have the ability to fund it for at least a year, maybe 2 years, based on the dollars that we have within the health department's budget. We've had a return to us, a reimbursement in Medicaid dollars that we weren't expecting to occur. So that helps us for the next year, 2 years. However, as we have had discussions with Mercy and Mercy St. Mary, Spectrum Health, and others, we're identifying that there's a greater need for us to join in a more collaborative effort beyond the health needs assessment that we do each year, where they contribute today a certain sum of dollars, $25,000, $30,000, I believe. Correct? Is that correct, Adam? We suspect that they will want to support that effort as we prove the importance of this position. This position will also help in our effort around the mental health crisis center that we're attempting to evaluate. That will be the point person for that work, as well as lead, as well as opioids, any significant issue that we're facing as a community. We need someone to champion that effort, to make sure that we are providing the right information, timely information, we're communicating effectively, so that the broader community can get their arms around this issue. So it's an important role. If in fact, I've mentioned it here in the last statement, the last bullet, if continuation funding isn't available, those positions will be reduced. If we can't find a way to leverage other resources, we'll have to identify where we will make cuts somewhere else. But we have to step up and lead, as we talked about in our strategic planning process. Lead the community around these important, complex issues. If we wait, I think we miss the opportunity to solve some of these problems that we're facing: lead, opioid, PFAS, other problems. The county has to be in a position to lead. We can't afford not to. So that's where the position is not typically correct. We would rather have solid commitments from our partners. We're not saying that they're committed at this point, but we suspect that they will be committed.
Commissioner Melton, first.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question as I'm looking through the dollar amounts for their, I'm guessing for their salaries. And while I don't have any problem with any of them, I'm just questioning how, I've never asked this, how do you come up with a salary idea? I mean,
There's a science to it. I'll have Amy Ralston or Steve Duarte come up. Why don't you come up, Amy, and explain the process by which we go through
I think
our
that's
HR director?
something people would
Yeah,
be interested in.
sure.
The question is, how salary amount in this current position?
How do we calculate it?
I make sure there's enough money.
The truth is, it's a partnership between HR and Fiscal, and we have some standard assumptions based on what we know about who is available and who might go into the position, about things like salary scale, where the person might come in the salary scale, benefit levels, other ancillary types of equipment, like, for instance, for road patrol deputies, cars, guns, those types of things. So all of that kind of goes into the hopper and the determination of what the salary level is.
Commissioner Saltville?
Excuse me. Thank you, Chair. In I think it was around 2012, we, the Sheriff's Department made efforts to move that whole emergency management process into a contractor status. And at the time, I know some long-serving employees even lost their positions because of that. It seems like now we're going back to the old model of bringing it in and not having contractors, and I guess I'm just curious, does that mean that the contractor model didn't work, or what's changed such that we're bringing that back in-house now?
I can attempt to answer it, maybe Michelle or Chuck to come up. I believe that the analysis that we did tells us that we can do a better job in managing it inside with the level of, I guess, interdepartmental collaboration between the Sheriff's Office and my office, and maybe you can speak to it more.
Yeah, and just a little bit of a history lesson with that timing of the contract move happened when we were reducing staff. And I think primarily it was an effort to reduce cost while still serving our primary emergency management needs. I can't speak to it. I wasn't in a decision-making role at the time that happened. But what I can say now is Jack Stewart did that role for a number of years and did it on a contractual basis. His availability diminished year over year for a contract position, and we found that it was eroding some of the effectiveness of some of our primary agenda items for emergency management. That being said, when I stepped into the role of sheriff, I felt like we had some gaps to cover with it. And again, the emergency management is a function of the board, not necessarily the sheriff's office. So we're acting in an advisory capacity to you and an oversight capacity to you on it. But there were a number of things that we were hearing from the community that hadn't been accomplished for a number of years that really needed to step up. I thought that could only be done with a full-time person. And as we just answered the previous question, as we post for positions such as this, we're competing with communities who are doing this on a full-time basis. And just as a matter of perspective, Ottawa County uses 3 full-time people to do the same thing that we have 1 lieutenant to do. So I think it's best served with a full-time person, and a full-time person augmented within the Sheriff's Department command staff, which we do pretty frequently. Your replacement staff comes from the Sheriff's Office, and I think as a combination, it's a pretty effective program, and we're making strides towards closing those gaps that we found when I took over.
Thank you. Commissioner Talon, you had some additional questions.
Well, kind of a follow-up to that. It's suggesting that the net, if you take out the grant-funded portions, is around 90,000. But isn't there even less net if you look at the reduction in the contractual amount?
Correct.
So can you tell us, is this going to cost more total compared to the contractual, or less, or what?
Yes, more total, but modestly more. I'm a criminal justice major where you don't major in math, but it's about $30,000 a year that we think is the net increased cost for this position, which would be different from the previous approach to taking it. And what we're getting in return, we had about 20 hours a week, and I say about because it surged and diminished depending on the time of year. Obviously, we had more demand during our weather emergencies or during specific situational emergencies, but the planning part of it really wasn't being done on an incremental basis. Now we have 40 hours a week. That's being devoted to planning largely, and then they do respond to critical incidents.
And a follow-up? Well, just follow up. And the support staff related to this position, have we already approved the transfer of those?
We had one. We have one person that is directly supporting emergency management. She's a planner. She was doing it as a contracted employee through the contract. That transitioned to a full-time employee that was fully paid for by the dollars that were being used to pay for it as a contract. So there was no net increase of cost to have that position, and she is now a full-time position. Again, we got more hours for about the same money by making that transition. Beyond those two individuals that are specifically assigned to emergency management, you know, the emergency management office uses our administrative staff, our command staff, our infrastructure that's in place at the sheriff's office. None of that is directly correlated to the emergency management department, but a lot of it financial. There's a lot of overhead financially for emergency management, managing the grants, and all that comes from the sheriff's office staff.
All right, any other questions? I'm sorry, Commissioner Hennessy.
It's more of an observation, but the health department position, the title itself.
Could you turn on your mic, please?
The health department position, the title itself is not a particularly good explanation or understandable by people, and it's quite a mouthful.
Yeah.
Is that really what it's going to be called?
Adam?
Good morning. For now. Yeah, the purpose will remain consistent with what we've described. The title itself may change, but it will be a division director level position, and that's really what's important here, consistent with our division directors in other areas. At least that's our vision for it at this time. So it will be focused on coordinating and shepherding the collaborative work of the county in partnership with our largest partners in the community.
Thank you. Making sure I've got which positions are which here. The Indigent Defense Administrator Attorney, that will be a part of the administration, and I didn't quite understand why this position's being placed there as opposed to someplace, you know.
It's a good question. Linda, you want to take that?
Under the statute that was passed that requires this position, it cannot be in the courts. It has to be independent from the judiciary. So it'll fall in the administrator's office, and then I'll be watching over the operation of that particular attorney.
And there was some reference to the number of people that an attorney could supervise or something, and I didn't understand that either.
The statute that set up this whole program references 8 specific factors. 4 factors have already been put forward, and we're responding to those 4 factors. Factors 5 through 8 do include potential limitations on the number of cases any individual can handle, so that an individual defense attorney is not overwhelmed and can provide good counsel. So depending on how that factor is actually crafted in Lansing, it may also impact this position, but we don't know that yet.
And another question in relationship to that position is, there is grant money for it, plus there will be general fund money?
The way the statute was set up was that the county is obligated to spend the same amount they had been historically spending on indigent defense. So that has not changed. These new requirements coming out of Lansing will be funded by state grants. The difficulty is in the way they force us to account for it. So we may need to account for it as partial general fund at the beginning of the year, but the ultimate bottom line is that the county's cost for indigent defense remains capped, and all the other expenses that may come from Lansing will again go back to Lansing in the form of the grant application. But it's a complicated accounting system that they're setting up. And so in the interim, if you were to look at it at any point in time, say in March, you would see part of this position coming out of the county's capped amount to contribute to the program, and part of it coming out of the grant. But at the end of the year, our capped amount will stay our capped amount.
Okay. That's clear as mud, but
And we understand. It's been a fight with Lansing on that type of stuff.
And the check's in the mail for the rest of it, right?
Well, exactly.
Yes, Commissioner Talent, number 3, got it.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. This is just a request of staff, I guess. Given my long participation in the local emergency planning committee, I would appreciate a little more, perhaps something in writing that compares what the costs were under the contract for the positions and what the cost is under the proposed, hopefully, current staffing.
Sure.
Just to get a comparison of that, because people ask me about that, and it would be helpful to have that information. Thank you.
All right, Commissioners, are we ready to vote? All right, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is approved. We will move on to item number 5.
Yes. This is a request to the board to add a part-time agriculture preservation specialist and a communication specialist in administration, a dock clerk, account clerk 2, and senior administrative specialist in the county clerk's office, a transfer station operator in the Department of Public Works, a community resource specialist 2 at the Kent County Community Action Department, and 5 patrol deputies in the sheriff's office. Administration is requesting a part-time agriculture preservation specialist to administer the Purchase of Development Rights Program. The estimated cost for this position is $45,800. Administration is also requesting a communication specialist to meet the board's communications priorities. The estimated cost for this position is $74,269. The county clerk is requesting a docket clerk and an account clerk 2 to establish adequate staffing levels for the court-side office. The clerk is also requesting a senior administrative specialist to oversee file management and retention. The estimated cost for these positions is $200,700. The Department of Public Works is requesting a transfer station operator in response to an increase in the volume and waste at the North Kent Transfer Station. The estimated cost for this position is $68,000. The Kent County Community Action Department is requesting a community resource specialist 2 to assist with housing choice voucher program. The estimated cost for this position is $77,602. The sheriff is requesting 5 patrol deputy positions to decrease wait time for residents in rural and outlying areas. Estimated cost for these positions is $427,800. If funding is eliminated or decreased, the positions will be eliminated unless continuation funding is approved pursuant to the fiscal policy on grants. And this one will actually go before the Board of Commissioners in November. This is different than the other one. The other one's an October 1 start date. And again, we have provided additional details for you in your packet. I would also like to add that the probate court brought a request in a little late in the process. We're still evaluating that position to deal with our guardianship program, the needs that are there. We're attempting to evaluate how we can support that position. And so that one may be to you at some point soon, but we're trying to figure out how do we place that, how do we fund it, and so forth with all of the other requests that we have on the table.
All right, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there support?
Support.
It is supported. All right. Questions from the commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Baum.
Yes, on the agriculture preservation, how many people total do we have supporting that right now? And part-time as well?
We have a part-time person, of course, Matthew Van Zetten from my office, and the spare time that I have, and Sandra Ghostin Jones are mostly the people that are linked to the position. So when it comes in-house, hopefully, if you approve this, we will support that position even more with the other staffs that we have in the office to the extent possible. The hope is that we can gain a lot from having that person in-house instead of it being part-time on a contractual basis to do all the things we think the position needs to do.
Okay, good. And then on the DPW issue, that's gone through the DPW board. 5 of the commissioners, our commissioners are on it, our colleagues are on it, and Commissioner Skaggs was here this morning on that issue. not concerning that issue, but future DPW, there'll be requests as we go to the business park at the south end of the county, and there'll be probably additional people coming up in the near future as that work continues. So just a heads up on that, not to do with this one.
Yes, Commissioner Saltfeld.
I want to follow up on Commissioner Bong's first comment. Just so I'm clear then, does that mean that the other position that exists today would go away?
Correct.
If this is approved?
Yes, it would. Yes.
Just for clarification, in that summary, it in the first bullet point, it mentions that position and then talks about the communication specialist. That's just
Separate, those
yeah, that's
two
not
separate.
related.
No,
Okay,
it's not.
That's what I thought.
Correct.
But it wasn't totally clear on that. Thank you.
Commissioner Melton.
Thank you, Chair. Under the Sheriff 5 patrol duty positions, to decrease wait time for residents in rural outlying areas, again, that's for someone in a city that can mean anywhere out there. It's kind of with the cyberspace for me. So, yeah, if you could just, in other words, do you have a targeted area that we could be a little more specific? So when people ask, again, we don't use the Sheriff's Department in Kentwood a lot. So that's one of the questions I get, and I am very supportive because you support our high school. But what rural outlying area are we talking?
So what this request accomplishes is one additional patrol car 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year.
Okay.
So that's what we're talking about. It's one additional car to respond to calls for service. And I'll draw your attention back to my performance measure presentation where we talked a lot about the sheriff's mandate to respond to calls for service. And we really focus on our priority 1 and 2 calls, which are emergency calls. They are in-progress events, things that have substantial property jeopardy or personal safety jeopardy. And what we're trying to do is accomplish a national average response rate for all communities in our county, 850 square miles of our county. And because we're seeing a population shift to the more rural portions of our county, and it's something that's been going on as a pattern over the last multiple years, but specifically in this last decade, and because of traffic congestion that are happening also in those outlying areas, we are seeing response time impact. So specifically, if I'm given this one card, you will see that car being assigned to the 8 North townships of Kent County. However, the impact is felt countywide because there'll be a shift of the rest of our general funded district cars to accommodate better coverage in all of the areas that are not contracting. There's certainly always a benefit when you have additional cars out there for the contracting entities or for the other law enforcement entities because it's a system, and that system shifts. If there's a surge, i.e. a major call in Kentwood where they don't have the resources, I shift Sheriff's Department patrol units to help cover Kentwood, and those outlying cars shift in to cover the calls that are happening for the entire county. So it's really important you don't look at it as a singular location that's covered. It instead is adding resources to the whole network.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yes, Commissioner Skaggs.
Okay, so I'm going to comment on 3 of these, if I may. So first off, on the administration part, on the agricultural preservation specialist, in some of the ancillary documents that we got, I think the memo of 18 July, it talked about a little bit about your thoughts, Wayman, on what would be the job duties for this person. So I know that this is more than what the contractor was doing. So can you expand a little bit more on what that is? I mean, I know that we're talking about, I think you phrased it as other possibilities to encourage farmland preservation other than PDRs, and then, our recent discussion about land use and how this position might fit into that.
Right. I'm going to have Matthew come up as well. Come on up, Matthew. the whole premise behind this is to figure out how we can solve some of the questions around funding for PDR, agricultural preservation. That's number one. Number two is to figure out how do we identify a more sustainable plan around this issue. We have looked at this, and my feeling is that we really need to become more strategic about how we deal with this issue. There's been several reports that have been published. The county needs to take a more proactive stance, the county itself, and not leave it to the Agricultural Preservation Board to do that. We will work in conjunction with them, but much like the Veterans Services Department, it once was a Soldiers Sailors Relief Department, one half-time employee. That employee did not attend to the growing veteran needs in our community to the extent that we felt needed to be done. When we brought that person more in alignment with the county and we made it full-time, we redid a lot of structure within that department. And as you know, over the years, it's just blossomed and become a best practice for the state in terms of how you organize and plan out that work. And we've been able to be in position to receive more dollars from the state of Michigan to support that program. Likewise, I feel this position will be able to do the same, being under the administrator's office and under direct oversight of the department, in that we can align that position like we have with Veteran Services. The ancillary supports and the ability to cross-collateralize the talent pool so that we leverage it and be able to get at some of these things that are a little bit more complex and require a lot more finesse, digging, due diligence to move us to a point where we can give you, the board, better policy recommendations, better decision points around how do we get us to where the sweet spot is for farmland preservation. That presentation that Matthew presented really was the first step towards that. I think you all heard how there were some things we were leaving things on the table that maybe we could be pursuing. That will be one of the key points. And maybe Matthew can expound on that.
So we anticipate if the position comes in-house that we would continue to manage the PDR Ag Preservation Ordinance and the grants that we can obtain through the federal government and others. But we would also think doing some due diligence, and specifically in PA 116, we understand that part of the reason more farmers don't participate in that is because of outside income restrictions that are in the law. So we'd want to do a deeper dive onto that to see what opportunities there might be to partner and change that. Second, it's the Tdr program we talked about. Since the presentation, some people have reached out to us to share more about their thoughts about that. That would give us capacity to follow up again and work with others to see if there's partnerships we could create and opportunities of support. And then third is convening local units of government to see what kinds of help they may want in terms of master plan and zoning ordinances. We have no idea because we haven't had a chance to convene. We showed the ridge area and the population growth, and we can talk about how those communities have done a really good job with their master plan and zoning ordinance, and we need to learn more from them. Maybe there's other ways to help other local units in supporting their home rule that they have. So those are the areas that we see as the opportunity to do, to work on. And then the leverage point that Wayman talked about is with our legislative priorities and other things that we could, if there's support, work collectively together internally as part of our work together. So that's the reason for the request. And
okay, great, thank you. I'm gonna pass, but come back later, as I think Commissioner Hennessy wants to talk on a similar topic.
All right, Commissioner Hennessy.
Yeah, talking about the administration and the positions there, there have been a number of changes since we changed administrators. And can you review for me just sort of who's doing what, who's on first? I thought we had a communications specialist.
We do.
And so maybe you could review the positions we have.
So in the administrator's office, Lori Latham is the Director of Public Relations and Communications today. We've also added a couple other positions within the administrator's office. Remember we said to you that instead of adding an assistant administrator, we wanted to take those dollars and supplant them for a full-time person in the board office, actually. Natasha is actually serving in that role. And then in addition to that, hire a strategic performance management manager, which is Mary Beth Van Til, who is responsible for the performance management system, implementing the strategic plan, working with departments, putting project management protocols in place so that we get things done more effectively. So those are the other positions. The position that we're talking about will assist Lori Latham and the office in implementing all of the strategies that were identified around communications. The board put on the table for us to really improve our level of communication transparency, our ability to move us into a more proactive role around communication. Social media is an important aspect of how we want to communicate. You heard the presentation earlier around IT and the mobile connectivity movement. That person, those skill sets are needed in our office. We don't have that expertise to the extent to be able to deliver all that. The other part of it is, Lori Latham and Lisa LaPlante, my expectation would be that they not only deal with media releases and so forth, but they also do crisis management. Whenever there's an issue, whether it's in our office or some other office. We used to have an organization ran by Tim Wondergem, his office. We reduced that out of the organization. That need still exists. Lori is the point person for our office for that. Rather than contract that out. Now, we do bring in from time to time outside temporary support from other entities, but it's not full-time. So that's one aspect. The other part of what she does is the legislative priorities. In that, Matthew and I both are now, I have 14 or 12 direct reports within my office. Matthew has a certain number. There's only so much one person can do when you talk about managing our relationship with Lansing, our legislatures, and managing all of the priorities that you all have. She's right in the middle of that. That's her big part of her focus. We want to revamp the website to make it more applicable, make it even better. Tim talked about that. We simply want to do a better job branding the county. So within that, she needs help and support, pulling from Natasha, pulling from Pam, pulling from Sherry Hall, reduces then the ability for them to do the other work that they need to do within the office. So I don't want to overwhelm them. They work hard. That position will help supplant that needed support for that area.
Commissioner Skaggs, you want to
reclaim my time,
pick up
I
again?
Okay, so I, of course, want to comment on the sheriff's request of road patrols, and it probably won't come as any surprise what my opinion is. Obviously, I have the deepest respect for the sheriff and her team. I certainly don't begrudge them their goal of improving the response times into those outlying townships. You know, what I do take issue with is who should pay for that. I think the continued and expanded subsidizing of public safety and outlying townships is not something that my taxpayers expect. As I've stated before, the taxpayers of East Grand Rapids and Grand Rapids pay for their own public safety. They certainly don't ask the county to support with most of that. And I certainly think that the townships should do the same, as several of them do. This is not a mandated service. I took a look at the Constitution. It's more than a little vague. It certainly doesn't have any actual response times, just that there need to be responsive. So I'm sure we would all agree that with or without this extra patrol car, we're complying with the constitutional mandate that we have. This would just be an extra supplemental support mostly for these townships that certainly have the opportunity to pay for this themselves. But if they don't want it, I continue to wonder why it is that we're asking my taxpayers, taxpayers in cities, taxpayers in townships that contract for service to pay for it. I note that I believe none of them are here today. There's no one from Algoma, Bound, Cortland, Grattan, Lowell, Nelson, Oakfield, Salone, Sparta, Spencer, Tyrone, or Vergennes Township asking for this. That wouldn't really change anything. It would just allow me to ask them why they're not paying for it themselves. They certainly have the ability to go to their voters and ask for a millage property tax increase and see if their voters want this service and are willing to pay for it or not. In addition, I question why we have a goal of rough similarity in service between contract and non-contracted townships. I wonder what the message is to contract townships, that yes, we'd like you to pay for this service, but we're also going to give it away to free to others. And again, if they want a 10-minute faster response time to these different priority levels, I think they have the opportunity to pay for it. I think it's also clear, given our last work session on the budget, that there are several things that could be sacrificed if we spent this large amount of money on this aspect. And those would be things that were mentioned as priorities for different departments, be that and facilities for that matter, where we still haven't quite made decisions there. So when we talk about lead, when we talk about the facilities garage, when we talk about agricultural preservation, if we're talking about kickstarting a Tdr program, when we talk about parks, or now we talk about probate position, these are all things that are going to be either impossible to fund or far more difficult to fund, including fund transfer balance to fill that hole that we see. If we go ahead and add another patrol car onto the one that one or two that came up last year, I believe, to do this. So I think it's a fantastic idea for these outlying townships to have increased service. But I simply think that this is, that we have enough service that the county needs to pay for, and we don't need to add any more. If they want that service, they should pay for it themselves. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Vonk.
Thank you, Chair. Having been through everything that he has talked about in Plainfield Township over the years, go back 40 years when we only had 10 to 12,000 individuals in the township and we couldn't afford a car. We didn't have the money for a car. We just had the money for our fire trucks. And our budget was pretty slim, and we needed new buildings and for government as well as fire, and we needed policing, and we moved ahead on grants and whatever else was available to get to the position that Plainfield is today when they have their own cars in Plainfield. And so you got to give a helping hand to Junior. You got to give a helping hand to your children. We give helping hands all over the place for different organizations, and that's what we're offering here, is a helping hand. I was out in Myers Lake, I mentioned to the sheriff, on the elevator on the way up, and there was a drunk driver. I contacted the sheriff, and there was no one in the area, and they then transferred to me Montcalm, and there was no one in the area, and then the state police, and this drunk driver about took out 3 cars on his way to a bar in the area. I won't mention which one, but and then was referred back to him that he had a license plate off a truck that wasn't even belonged to that Mustang that he was driving. But anyway, this is what happened out in the rural area and smaller communities, and they do need that helping hand, and I'm more than willing to help the other communities, having gone through that same process myself over the years in government. So, thank you.
Commissioner Talon.
Thank you, Chair. A couple topics, but I'll follow up on the sheriff's request. I guess I recognize, as others have, the the intent of improving response times, I also wonder, we heard Administrator Britt use the word laser focus, and I wonder how much laser focusing there was on this proposal. So for example, did we look at the option of providing additional road patrol just on weekends? Would that have brought, is there a greater need on weekends for calls? Oh, I thought you had left, sorry, I didn't see in the back. Is there a greater need for calls on the weekend versus during the week? Could we have focused in on that and requested 3 positions?
Well, and again, I'll go back to the fact that one car, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, is the 5 positions that we're asking for. We have looked a lot at the times of calls, day of the week, time of day. We've done a lot of research on what our actual call load is, and we have shifted cars to different response areas over the course of the last 18 months to cut down our response times, and we've seen a 2-minute improvement by doing that. But one of the ways that we've accomplished this, and I have to follow up on a comment that Commissioner Skaggs made too, we did get additional law enforcement patrol officers, but not additional funding to go with it a couple years ago. And we did that by exactly what you're implying. We looked at when we had staff available through a combination of overtime hours and regular patrol hours, and we focused those hours that we're already paying for differently around the clock and towards our special events, which we're actually contracted to do and paid to do. And we were able to leverage some of those resources to increase our patrol time. So we've studied it very hard to make sure that we were able to accomplish some of that. But there is a gap. And as I look back, if we're looking at our high water mark for patrol services being in 2008, I would implore you to look at the differences in where our population lives and how they live, and the route between those locations prior to 2008, 2009, and today. And we are changing dramatically and often. And I do think there's a point for just a small clarification. There are differences in the types of calls for service. Our focus is on the emergency calls for service, priority 1 and priority 2. You are not seeing in front of you the responses for priority 3 through 9 for these unfounded townships. And frankly, I think that is what townships contract services for. They contract services to do preventative patrol and response to non-emergency calls. And if I showed you the response times for those calls for all of these townships in comparison, you would see a tremendous gap. You would see hours and hours of response time averages for the unfunded townships, for the uncontracted townships. But when we're focused on priority 1 and 2 calls, these are emergency responses, and I would say I believe that is the county's responsibility, and it's in close alignment with where your strategic priorities are. Quality of life, first and foremost, has to do with your safety. And do you feel safe in your environment? And do you believe the safety net that's supposed to be there from government is in place when you dial 911 and you're having the worst day of your life? So that's why you see us leveraging those resources to those times that those service calls are. But obviously I can't predict that your moment of need is going to be during the time I've leveraged resources. So I do have to have some basic coverage. And I just have a limited number of general fund resources covering patrol even today.
Could I
Yes,
follow up?
one follow-up.
I think we do have general coverage right now. I thought that this was the purpose of these 5 positions was to reduce the response time to get us closer to the national average. That's what I've heard.
So I have communities in our patrol area who are seeing upwards of 30 to 50 minute response times for priority 1 and 2 calls. And those are emergency calls. And what we're trying to do is leverage the resources so that they're getting generally the same experience or as close to the same experience. And some of this areas, if I could point out, 131, for example, travels through communities that have response time of 30 to 50 minutes. We have 96 that travels through. We have major M roads and arteries that our population is traveling through. It is not necessarily just the house that resides in that township that would contribute specifically to a public safety millage in that township. It's all of us moving through our whole community, our whole county community, to work and to play and to see family and friends. And without that basic net, that priority 1 and 2 response, there is a jeopardy for every one of our citizens.
Commissioner Ponstein.
Thank you, Chair Steck. So the 2 questions I had were pretty much answered, but I just wanted to highlight a couple things. First of all, you know, this city versus township.
Is your mic on, Commissioner Ponstein?
Do I need it?
Well, not for me, you don't, but thank you.
So the city versus township battle's got to come to an end. I remember when I was on a school board, we were building a new school. It'd be a higher millage rate. I remember someone in the crowd saying that, you know, I've got to pay a higher rate for this, but the people living in the mobile home park pay a lower rate. And that's not fair. We got to find a better way to fund this. And I remember, you know, my response is that where you live in the community should decide what services and what type of education you get. And that's the same thing here. A lot of people live in the townships because, one, it is cheaper. And maybe they can't afford to live in the city and afford all the benefits that I get by living in the city of Granville. But I think the sheriff is correct. A lot of those highways come through townships. And I remember early in my life, I was hit head-on by a drunk driver. Luckily, I got hit between the city of Granville and the city of Walker. And the response there was within minutes. But because I had that same accident maybe in a rural highway, that I've got to wait longer now to get a response when it may be life-threatening. The services that we're adding to cut down those times benefit all county residents because we all travel. We don't just stay in our little city and never leave. And I think that's the part that's missing. We can't pit citizens against citizens because of their economic status or where they can and cannot live. That's just plain wrong. The other thing I wanted to add is that I appreciate Administrator Britt's take on the agricultural issue. I would just hope that maybe we just strike the word PDR from there. I mean, it's still such a hot button topic. And I'm sure I'll be accused if I vote for this of here he is promoting PDR. I think my stance on agriculture has been very simple. And from the report that Commissioner Salfeld's group put together is that I'm not so much advocating the preservation of agriculture. I think it's well documented that I'd rather see the expansion of agriculture. I mean, what an economic driver. What a job producer. I think the right place has got it tackled on what the benefit of agriculture is to the ag producers and the people that use the ag products to bring products to our table. That's all important. I heard the R letter, recession. That's one industry that seems to be recession-proof. During the downturn, ag land held its value. It also provided food at a reasonable price. So it's probably one of the most recession-proof industries that we have in Kent County. So instead of worrying about preserving it, I think this might be an asset that we should try to enhance and maybe expand. And hopefully the position isn't just looking at PDR, but it looks at ways agriculture can diversify our economy and provide jobs to the people that live in this county.
Thank you. Commissioner Hennessy.
I appreciate the sheriff's explanation here. She talked a lot about how looking at how the uses have changed, the type of work has changed. So I know that there's a strategic plan that there is going on. We have seen increases in that department over the last few years. So strategically, what can we expect? We've had these increases in increased positions over the last few years, whether it be school resource officers, correction officers, the emergency management deputies. So where are we going? What are we going to be seeing next year or the year after? I mean, I know that there's this strategic look going on.
Yep.
And the other thing with strategy is, are we looking to achieve any kind of a buy-in from these rural townships?
Yes. Yes, for both of you, for both of those questions. We are in the middle of, and in fact, towards the end of producing a strategic plan. So I will be sharing the draft document here in the next probably 45 days with the Board of Commission for you to kind of weigh in on, check for alignment with what your priorities are, and kind of see what our vision is for the Sheriff's Office. And I'll take you back to several years ago when we started to really work forward on, we have some gaps that we're trying to fill, and we're trying to establish a baseline of service where I talked about doing everything in measure. Doing something that pushes the goal forward, but then giving it some evaluation time and measurement time so we can tell if the strategy worked, make adjustments to that strategy before we add additional people. And which is why it seems like for several years we've been up here asking, because we didn't ask for all of it at once. We asked for it a little bit at a time. Over the last several years, we've made some strides in our corrections department. That's most of in fact, all of the positions that we received last year were in corrections. And really those were exchanged for overtime dollars. They weren't new dollars for the correctional facility. They were an exchange of dollars that we would have spent in overtime and had historically spent in overtime and exchange those for people. And that has some jeopardy with it, right? Because you have pension and you have benefits and everything else that goes with a person, but you also have a lot more surge capacity when you have more bodies and you have a bigger need that happens in the future. So I think we're better positioned to be responsive to the needs in our correctional division, and I don't expect large asks moving forward in our corrections division. I feel like we're pretty close to being right sized. It's a dynamic industry. So if there's a legislative change next year that increases my inmate needs or specific needs of particular inmates, or I'll give you an example of the indigent defense, was a specific legislative initiative that then had a response that was necessary for the Sheriff's Office. Most of our building security positions, and in fact all of the building security positions, are actually court positions. And I can't control whether or not they're going to ask for court positions next year, the year after. I'll agree they need them, and I'll agree to support them. We had FOC positions. Again, those were contracted positions. That wasn't a Sheriff's Office initiative. Those were contracts that we're responding to. All of the SRO positions, all of the township positions are positions that are partnerships that kind of fall into other entities' strategic plans. We certainly have a yes or no decision point when we take them on, but again, all of these positions further the overall community safety, and I support them. In terms of what you can expect in law enforcement, I think this one 24-hour car is going to make huge strides towards getting where we need to get on the priority 1 and 2 responses throughout the county. Will it get 100%? Probably not. It'll make huge strides. I think our conversations to the townships that are largely affected by these response times need to happen, have happened, will continue to happen. And I think when they see us as a partner in that conversation, we will get further with those strategies. They definitely are going to have to up their ante, if you will. And sometimes it can't be for a full car, but it can be for specific patrol hours. We're seeing that in Sand Lake, for example, where they're contracting for $50,000 a year, specific patrol hours that meet their community needs for the other than priority 1 and 2 responses. That would be, you know, like if you B&E responses to a garage or increased traffic responses. Those are things they're contracting for. Those are the kind of partnerships we are advocating for some of the other townships to start looking at and maybe pool their resources together for officers. So I know, answered everything, but we've had requests that covered the entire spectrum. I don't anticipate large numbers moving forward for a period of time. I think we need to get the staff on, get them up to speed, get our strategy in place, and have a pretty substantial evaluation period before we know what's next with general funded positions. Does that answer your question? Okay.
That was fine.
Did you have a follow-up,
I
Commissioner
have
Hennessy?
one other, and that's just to clarify, when we look at the costs on this, does that include the costs of recruitment and training and uniforms and cars?
Uniform and cars, yes, and recruitment and training is factored into the cost allocation that we have per person, so yes, it would be factored into then. There's always obviously an increased cost initially, but then a substantially decreased cost overall. And again, at the Sheriff's Department, we typically maintain our staff. We have a very few people that will leave the department outside of that first year when they're going through probation before retirement. So very few people. So our costs are all up front with that, and then we reduce it over time, even though the cost allocation doesn't reduce over time per body.
Let's see, Commissioner Talon, you had a second?
The other topic I wanted to ask about, comment and perhaps a proposal. The communications specialist position is pretty troubling to me at this point. And I remember when the commission pushed to add a communications person. Initially, it was part-time, then it became full-time, and now we're looking at adding another communications person. And on top of that, I don't find, while everything else is documented in writing in here.
There's a memo that
didn't see a memo
came late. Let's see if I have it
come
here.
to me about this. So I'm uncomfortable making a decision about that position, given what I've heard and been given. I wonder if it would be possible to look at a way to remove that from this group. So I guess I would ask the chair or council whether I could move to divide the question, or what would be the best way to proceed to remove that?
I think procedurally it would be to submit a motion to divide the question, to sever that issue out. If you make the motion and it's seconded and supported, then that would be set out.
And Wayman want to?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that we did have a late entry memo related to this position. Somehow it didn't get into the packet, so we have it here that explains it. The position really is to ensure that the board's strategic initiatives get implemented. It's really the focus of this position. More than anything else, we do not want it to be said that we have not done all that we can do to move forward the plan that we identified through the strategic plan. And I believe that this position will push us further ahead also to be able to gain leverage on other opportunities for funding, whether they be from the state, whether they be from the feds. It just pushes us into a position to do more than what we're doing today. I think we're missing opportunities. I don't think we've just scratched the surface in terms of what this position can do for the county. So that's my position. I hope that you support it. I guarantee you there will be evidence that this position will earn its keep. And the level of support that Lori provides to not only the board office, but to the outlying departments, whether that be the clerk's office, the prosecutor, the treasurer, the sheriff's office to some extent, is well documented in terms of of the value add that it brings to the table. The problem is that because we're good at what we do, we're limiting then some of the things that we need to do internally related to your priorities. We don't want to miss the opportunity to implement all the things that we have on the plate. It's a stretch to hear from the board, we want you to do this, and then not be able to make the leap and give you what you want. I want to give you what you want. Total dollars on the table comparing to where we were in 2009. And here's the other thing. If we were in a position whereas the budget today was keeping up with the general population growth and the demands that are placed on this county, it would be different. We have ramped up slower than our city municipalities, for instance, because of the cap on our taxes. So we're not able to really adjust and give the community the support that it needs with the growth that we're having. We're behind. I simply want to catch up a little bit so that we're not dragging, we're leading, we're providing the board the services and supports that they expect us to provide.
And I appreciate that, and it's still not clear to me. I guess it would be helpful to see what, the director's position has morphed into over the last year or two, and get that in writing so we can see what those responsibilities are, because the things you've talked about I would have thought were the responsibility of that person, and it's not clear to me why they can't do that unless there's some other responsibilities like the legislative priorities, which I heard you mention. I'm not sure why that's the communication persons, other than putting together our document. We hire lobbyists to do that work.
They work in concert with them.
So I guess a better understanding, seeing that job description, comparing would be helpful. I don't sense that there's an urgency since this is for the new year. So I would like to move to divide the question to separate that one position out, and what I would propose next, if that is successful, is to table that motion, which would be separated. But let's see if there's support to separate the question first.
All right, there's been a motion made to divide the question under Rule 3.15, and I take it to divide the question only to set aside the proposed portion that deals with the administration communication specialist. Okay. That is the motion. Is there a support? There is support. All right. Is there any discussion on that motion?
Yeah, I'll be voting no, because the essence of this question is to ultimately take this portion out of the resolution. I think it belongs there. I think it's been well stated, so I'll be voting no.
Okay. Any further comments on the motion to divide the question? Commissioner Bonstein.
Thank you, Chair Steck. And I appreciate the time that you've allowed today for the back and forth and the follow-up question. I think the discussion's been productive. I'm going to be voting no on the table also. When I'm out in the community, the number one question I always get since I've been a county commissioner is, what does county government do? And to the average person, that's the toughest thing of navigating our system. We all have phones now. During this meeting, I've probably gotten 20 messages regarding things that are happening. We've got a great story to tell in Kent County, and it is not being told. We need to better inform people what we do, how we do it, and why we do it. I think one thing that's been strongly lacking for years is our communication with the public. I think Administrator Britt has hit this right on, the nail right on the head. We've got to do a better job. And it's not just going to be a narrow focused job. He's left the description wide open to benefit us in all areas and get the communication working, not just with themselves, but with the whole county as a whole, to tell that story and to tell our residents why Kent County's different and why it's the county that it is.
Any other commissioners? Just to clarify, I think the motion is to divide the question, which would be to, if it is approved, we would be taking a vote first on the rest of the motion, and the second vote would be on just that question on the administrator, unless there's a subsequent motion. Yes, Commissioner Skaggs.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to be voting no on this. I think that the communications position is desperately needed. But I would want to encourage the administrator to get us increased information that Commissioner Talon has asked for as soon as possible. I mean, obviously, this memo came out 5 minutes ago, as far as we're all concerned in reality. And that can't be how we make personnel decisions. So I think it makes a lot of sense to have a job description here, to be able to compare it to Lori's job description and Natasha's, and see where we're at. In general, I'm sympathetic. Let's, as Commissioner Ponstein said, we should have increased communications. I think it was one of the things that came out of the input sessions on the community plan. I would also suggest, that I'm not going to make a motion to divide and take out the sheriff's request for the road patrols. That's going to unfortunately make me vote no on the whole entire issue. But I do think that clearly there are some controversy on several of these. And I don't think that these should have been all lumped together under one motion in the first place. So I think that when it gets to the board, we should have these, teased out by department at least, so that there can be, I know that's going to take a little longer, but I think that it makes a lot more sense to do it that way than clump together such, diverse requests.
All right, further questions or comments on the motion?
Can you state this first vote is for the complete proposal?
The motion right now before the committee is to divide the question, and that is to divide the question on the proposed position dealing with the communication specialist out of the rest of the motion. So a yes on that motion would divide the question. We'll vote separately then on the rest of the package and then just the administration communication position. A no would mean that we are back to the debate on the full motion. Commissioner Melton.
Just a very quick comment since Commissioner Skaggs brought it up. Sorry. I'm sitting here and I have to admit that this was an awful lot of information for me to take in since I got my packet, and I have worked pretty hard to try and navigate through all the different positions that we are asking for. I am personally, I'm sympathetic, so I'm usually one that, sure, the more the merrier, and let's do all of this. But when you're really making these hard, heavy decisions, I too would like to just ask that maybe if you just do a remedial for Commissioner Melton or whatever, but something that would help me not feel like I'm doing agriculture and sheriff, and I'm doing this over here, and all at one vote. That would help at least this personal commissioner better.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Coleman, I'm going to come back to you because I think you had your hand up under the general motion, or did you want to address this motion? No. All right. If no other comments, I'll call for a roll call vote on the motion to divide the question.
Commissioner Hennessy.
Yes.
Commissioner Coleman.
No.
Commissioner Melton.
Yes.
Commissioner Ponstein.
No.
Commissioner Saulfeld.
No.
Commissioner Skaggs.
No.
Commissioner Talon.
Yes.
Commissioner Vonk.
No.
Chair Stack.
No?
We've got 6 noes and 3 yeses. Motion fails.
All right, so the motion to divide did not pass. We're back to the full motion, which addresses all of the positions. Now, Commissioner Coleman, did you have anything else?
Thank you, Chair. To return to Commissioner Skaggs' comments, I first want to agree in the sense that I do think it's important that with any expenditure that we're thinking about, is this, benefiting, the county as a whole and our general constituents as a whole appropriately, and not in one particular group or another. in this particular case, I think that the nature of what's needed and the nature of who we support in public safety makes the argument one that I totally disagree with. If I'm in an accident by Reed's Lake, the East Grand Rapids Police will come help me. If Commissioner Skaggs, you are in an accident by the Outlet Mall, the King County Sheriff will come and help you. On my way in this morning, it was quite a bad accident right at 100th and Clyde Park. And were those people from my district? Could be. Were they from Ottawa County? Very likely. Like, we all travel all over the county, and if you're in an emergency situation, even in an area that you don't live, a 20-minute response time for help is a very long wait. So I fully support the work being done here, and I think it's artificial to try to account for the expenses based on where the people that need help are from.
Yes, Commissioner Skaggs.
Just a response to some of this discussion about highways. I think maybe people are forgetting the Michigan State Police patrol the highway. And so you've got that opportunity for you there too. Also want to note that if you're on Reed's Lake Boulevard and someone comes to your rescue from the East Grand Rapids Public Safety, you didn't pay for that. My taxpayers paid for that. Now, if something happens to me out at the Outlet Mall, my taxpayers paid for that one too. And so this is not a question about public safety. This is a question about who pays. You could say that we move around. Of course we move around, right? People from townships move into cities too, as you mentioned. So when they're there, they're getting services that they did not pay for. I think it makes sense for the county to play some role for constitutional reasons and for common sense reasons to give some support to townships, but the division that you talk about and that others have talked about is divisions that exist in the Michigan Constitution. We have different municipalities, we have townships, we have cities. They pay for different things. We have counties. So the choice really is who's going to pay for it. And it's, I think, not, again, as you think through these issues, why should my taxpayers pay 100% of these patrol agents? I pay 20%. That might make sense for what's happening on the highways, but 100 I think is unreasonable. And Mr. Chair, I'd also like to call for a roll call vote.
Yes. Commissioner Salfeld.
Well, I guess I'll weigh in. First, I just say I concur with what Commissioner Ponstein said on these issues. I think it's pretty dangerous to start pitting who pays questions on deciding budget issues. If that's the case, then let's look at who pays the most per capita as a taxpayer in this county, because I guarantee you that's probably mostly my constituents. So does that mean I should get more of the budget going to Ada, Cascade, Grand Rapids Township? Or alternatively, it brings up this issue that we're here to represent our citizens, but we're here to represent the county as a whole too. And there's things that we do on behalf of the county. If we're going to start looking at things based on how does this impact just the people in my district, then I guess I'm not worried about lead. And that's silly, because I do think lead's important, and I know that the vast majority of the money that we're adding to spend on lead is not going to people that live in my district. So let's just, as Commissioner Ponstein said, just stop this silly nonsense trying to pit townships against cities. Thank you.
I opened the door to 3 strikes in this debate, so I can't stop it. This will be your third one, and you're certainly welcome to it, Commissioner Ponstein.
Thank you, and it'll be brief. And when we start saying things, well, I'll use Granville. We've got a beautiful mall at the south end. People come from all over. They get into an accident, they get arrested, whatever it is, yes, the Granville taxpayers are paying 100%. But is that really true? Because all those businesses at that south end that these people are coming in to pay property taxes. And those property taxes are paid through purchases that people made at those stores. So the thought that somehow the city is paying 100% all on their own is a false.
All right, Commissioner Coleman. You only had one so far, so you are.
I'm only to two.
In good graces.
I would just echo those sentiments. I do think it's dangerous to get into an in-depth accounting comparison game. If we want to get into that game and look at, so we've got new expenditures needed for the Sheriff's Department. Let's look at the new contribution to tax revenue for the whole county. I would be happy to compare Byron Township and East Grand Rapids in terms of new contribution of tax revenue in the last 5 years.
All right. Well, this has been an exhaustive deliberation. I think we are ready to vote, and a roll call was requested. So will you call the roll?
Commissioner Hennessy. Yes. Commissioner Coleman.
Yes.
Commissioner Melton. Yes. Commissioner Ponstein.
Yes.
Commissioner Saalfeld.
Yes.
Commissioner Skaggs.
No.
Commissioner Talon.
No.
Commissioner Vonk.
Yes.
7 yes, 2 no, motion passes.
Well, if you'd asked me, I'd have voted.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Chair Steck.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
All right, the motion has been approved. Move to item number 6, which is miscellaneous. Does any commissioner have any miscellaneous they wish to bring? Yes, Commissioner Melton.
Having just been through what we did, there are so many positive comments that were made and made in good faith and with thoughts about both the county and where we live and what we're experiencing. And yet when it came to a vote for all of these things, I have to just say I felt a little uncomfortable that they were all put together. And so there again, I come back to, I mean, even the first one, I mean, both of them were so many pieces to have to try and filter out without having a chance to really dive into what each one represented, what each thing did. So an overall yes or an overall no didn't necessarily represent what I might have felt or Commissioner Staggs might have felt or whomever. I think it would be personally a better idea that we look at each thing, or at least as categories, better. And that's not a criticism, would be for my own sake, because it was a very difficult decision to make.
All right. Any other miscellaneous? No? Okay. All right, I had a couple of items. I also, I guess, will join in that I appreciate the good faith and intense debate, deliberation today. Everyone brought their concerns and issues to the table, and that's what we're here to do. So thank you for that. We are about to embark on the appointment process, which is one of our funner times of the year for this committee. So I am in the process of identifying the interview committees or teams, and I'm going to assume that all of you are willing to sit on at least one of those, unless you get a hold of me and let me know that that's not possible, or there you have a particular concern or issue with that. But otherwise, I intend to appoint everyone to at least one of these committees to follow through and do the interviews, and then we'll make the assignments thereafter. Again, the timing of that is we are looking at getting the applications in by the end of September, I believe it is. And so we'll be then doing the scheduling of the interviews with the teams thereafter in October and November, looking to have our appointments completed by the time we get to the end of the year. So I look forward to that. And then just for information as well, there are a couple more policy issues, legislative policy issues that are still percolating out there, and we'll look forward to identifying that at some time in the future and bringing those back to this committee for their final review and consideration. Specifically, the one that I can think of is the bail reform statement. So with that, if there's no other miscellaneous, we are adjourned.
I am Kent County. I am Kent County.
I am Kent County.
We are 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 Kent County.
Beya, Kent County. Ami, Kent County.
Somos, Kent County.
Mas Ira, Kent County.
We are Kent County. We are Kent County. We are Kent County. Oh yeah.